Hey there, and welcome to another Health Essentials podcast. I'm John Horton, your host. Sometimes your body has a way of going off script, and alopecia areata is one of those moments. The autoimmune condition can cause hair to just fall out in patches. It often happens without warning, too, which can be unsettling for anyone dealing with a flare-up. Thankfully, treatment advances have made managing alopecia areata easier. We're going to talk through some of those options today with dermatologist Amy Kassouf. She's one of the many experts at Cleveland Clinic who visit our weekly podcast to help us better understand our bodies. So with that, let's learn about the tools available to deal with alopecia areata and why they offer so much hope. Dr. Kassouf, thanks again for stopping by to chat. It's always a good day when you are on the guest list.
Well, it's very nice to be here. Thank you, John.
Well, before we get into our topic, I want to talk a little about you and your approach to dermatology. I've heard you talk about the psychological aspect of skin and hair conditions, and that even though, some of these may not be life-threatening issues, they affect how you live. Can you explain kind of that thought in more detail and how it guides you?
We've talked before about how big our skin is and what an impact it has on our life. And I think it has a lot to do with how we present ourselves, how confident we feel, how distracted we feel. You know, if you have a pimple on your face and all you can think about is that pimple, how are you going to appropriately do whatever your job says that you need to do, or study or learn what you're supposed to learn? So I think there's a lot of distraction issues. I think there's a lot of self-confidence issues. I think aside from the sort of pain and itch and, other symptoms that the skin can bring forth, you don't have to die from a disease to be severely impacted from it.
And I know you mentioned skin and then hair too. I think we've all had those bad hair days where you're going someplace, whatever, and you never feel comfortable for the entire day because you just feel like something's off. I may be having one of those today, to be honest. So
I've had lots of them, but yes, you're right. You don't quite feel put together. You don't feel like you can move forward and present your best self and think about what you're doing rather than what everybody's looking at when you're presenting. So especially these Zoom days, I think it's gotten even worse since maybe the last time we talked, since we've had a pandemic and everybody's on the internet and everybody can Zoom in on you, and lots of issues with the skin.
Well, and the skin and the hair, and that kind of leads us right into our main topic today, which is alopecia areata. And that is obviously a different level of having a bad hair day, because it's literally you're losing hair. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit, and kind of let's just start with what alopecia areata is, because it's not kind of the basic hair loss we think about, like the receding that comes with age. This is an immune system issue, correct?
Correct. This is an autoimmune disease where your immune system attacks your hair follicle. And there's some theories about why that happens, and it can happen at any age. So you can brush through your hair or your child's hair or somebody else's hair and all of a sudden find a bald spot. And that's a panicky situation. And you don't know how fast it's going to progress, if it's going to progress, what you have to do about it, what you did to start that process happening. So it's very, very emotional.
Now, when you say spots, like what size spots are we talking about? Are these like kind of big spots? Are they on the smaller side? How noticeable can they be?
So they can be as little as a fingertip or as big as a $50. And the problem is they can spread, and they can become as much as your whole head or your whole body and your head. It can include eyebrow hairs and eyelashes, which are big functional issues. It's very, very scary to find that first little spot, no matter how big it is.
So, when it spreads, obviously it's not like a contagious thing, but is it just that your immune system kind of it goes a little haywire and it's just kind of a cascading effect?
Yep. It recognizes a protein in your hair follicle that it thinks is foreign and it needs to attack it. And sometimes that's just a little local area and we treat it and it goes away and fills back in and it's no big deal. And sometimes it just goes crazy and it goes after every hair on your whole body.
Now, are there certain people who are more prone to this? Does it hit certain groups a little bit more?
It seems to be that people who get autoimmune diseases or have autoimmune diseases in their family are more prone to this. It comes in groups. Once somebody comes in with alopecia areata or similar autoimmune diseases, sometimes we go ahead and look for other autoimmune diseases happening.
And it sounds like there's no rhyme or reason to when you might get a flare up. Like you could be rolling along, no problems, no problems, no problems, and then boom, one day all of a sudden you have one of these patches pop up.
So I'm going to say that something that is very hard to quantify. Stress is probably a big
Yeah.
issue implied on this. But it's so hard to know which stress, when stress, how do you control stress? I can't treat the stress. But most people do notice their first flare or their flares after that with a stressful event.
I mean, that makes sense because I know we've talked on this podcast countless times about just the detrimental effects that stress has on your body. And I think we all feel it. We're also used to having stress in our day, but you don't often just take a moment to think about what it's actually doing to your whole system. And it sounds like alopecia areata starting up could be just kind of a byproduct of that stress that builds up.
And I don't want anybody to think that stress is the only cause of it. I think you have to be a little predisposed to it first, and then the stress sets it off.
It could be a trigger. It just that
It can be
thing
a
that
trigger.
kind of
That's a good word.
that kind of opens up the floodgates and lets it kind of go. And you know, as we know, the body is a mystery, and there's still so much we're trying to figure out. And it seems like this is one of those cases.
And every time we figure out one thing, it opens up 10 more questions.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating.
Yeah. Now, we have figured out a lot. And I know that was something you were really excited to talk about. And that's when we look at treatment options. A few years ago, things were very limited. But now we've seen some advances. So kind of walk us through what some of those are and what they mean for folks.
So not everybody goes straight to the big guns. So if you notice you have a little patch or when you need to get diagnosed in the beginning, there's lots of simple things to start with. And then depending on the progression and how you respond to the treatment, then we can start to move forward. But we don't have to do some of the things that used to have lots of side effects. So, we still start with a topical steroid or a topical calcineurin inhibitor, some of the eczema creams, and a lot of small injections of cortisone. So if you just have one little quarter-sized spot, somewhere hidden in your scalp, that's still the best way to treat it. But if it seems like it's progressing rapidly, if it seems like this is going to be a real impact on your life, we have a whole new class of medicines called JAK inhibitors.
Okay. Well, walk us through what those are, because I'm guessing a lot of people haven't heard about them, don't know how they work. What's the process on that?
So the JAK inhibitors are pills. They don't have to be injections. And
a plus.
A plus for a lot of people, for sure. And they can modulate how aggressive the immune system is. And so there's several different ones. They started off actually to treat arthritis. And as we've looked at the mechanism of that action, it turns out that it can modulate this attack on the hair follicle by the immune system.
So basically, it sounds like this pill that you take, it kind of it prevents your immune system from looking at these proteins in your hair as being enemies, and just kind of turns their attention to the things they really should be paying attention to.
Exactly. So when we take a biopsy, when we look at the skin under the microscope where there's alopecia areata, we notice lots and lots of immune cells around the hair follicle. And we call that a swarm of bees pattern, where all these immune cells are clustering around the hair follicle. And what the JAK inhibitor does is basically tell them, no, you turn off and you go away.
Go away. Shoo, get out of here.
Exactly.
That's really fascinating. You don't think about that happening, like you have these cells all ganging up on a hair and making it fall out.
Right. So the hair follicle is still there, but the swarm of immune cells, these bee-like immune cells that are around the hair follicle, just make it so that it's swollen and it can't hold that hair anymore. But if we make them go away, it can grow a brand new hair. So it doesn't damage, it doesn't scar the hair follicle. if we turn it off, it allows them to grow again, which I think is amazing.
If people are taking JAK inhibitors, is that something that you take all the time if you're kind of prone to alopecia areata? Is it something that you just take in the moment when you start seeing symptoms?
You control it. We don't cure it. So it is, if you need that level of treatment for your alopecia areata, you're probably going to be on it for life, at least at this point. There may be a time where there are some interesting new therapies that may cure some autoimmune conditions. So at least you'll be taking it until something new and better comes along.
So I think that's a key thing there. So basically the JAK inhibitors are kind of a block that kind of prevents it from happening, but they're not curing whatever the autoimmune condition is that's causing it. They're just kind of slowing it or silencing it for the moment.
Yeah, it can rev right back up again if the stop is removed. Yep.
So obviously that's something that it's something people go to if they're having pretty serious problems. It's pretty regular. It's really affecting their life. What are some other just those base medical treatments that are available to address alopecia areata?
So we touched a little bit on topical steroids and injectable steroids, where we actually just put a little teeny injection of that cortisone right around the base of that hair follicle and turn it off locally so that you don't get a whole systemic reaction to that steroid. Because we know steroids over long periods of time and high doses, which we used to have to use when we didn't have JAK inhibitors, have lots of side effects. They can thin your bones and cause blood pressure issues and diabetes issues. So it's nice to have an alternative, but local treatment with that is not such a big deal.
All right. And that's something that sounds like people will come in, like if you have a little patch that all of a sudden pops up, I take it you make an appointment, you come in right away and you get those injections and it kind of stops it in its tracks.
Yep. You do it once a month until they grow back, which usually is a few months. Sometimes a little longer. Sometimes we chase them for a while and then they turn off. So.
Right. What about, I saw some other things that might be used, minoxidil, which I know everyone kind of associates with kind of hair growth. Is that something that's used frequently for alopecia areata?
So that's interesting. So I think minoxidil is a general fertilizer for the hair. I think it just helps the hairs grow. They stay in growth phase longer. We've used it topically for decades now for the regular pattern hair loss that happens as we get older, or if we have the hair loss gene or whatever. But it seems to be a nice adjunct to any treatment that we're using for JAK inhibitor or for alopecia areata as well, including the JAK inhibitors. So
we just did a whole podcast looking at kind of hair growth stuff too. And honest God, it could have been a gardening podcast. That's why I laughed when you said fertilizer, because it seems like that is what it is.
Yep, it just pulls in the good nutrients and helps those hairs grow, no matter what kind of hair loss you have. So that's kind of it's not just for alopecia areata. That's a good one. Yeah.
And then other methods I saw, phototherapy and PRP. Are those kind of useful tools when it comes to managing alopecia areata?
So phototherapy, I think, is interesting. I don't use it as much as I used to. It is immunomodulatory, so it does have the ability to turn off that overactive immune system. But when the hairs start to grow back, they start to block the light. So there's a limited use with that. I don't do that very much anymore.
Okay. And then PRP, is that?
The PRP, I think, is interesting as well. You have to draw blood, you spin it down, you take this special area of the blood that has all these growth factors in it, and you inject it back into the skin. And I think it is helpful, especially for people who don't do well with cortisone injections and that kind of thing. The studies were sort of 50-50, and they're expensive, and you have to, draw blood and go through this whole procedure. I think there is a place for it, just like there is a place for red light therapy. But I think it's not as defined as some of the other therapies are.
Dr. Kassouf, I loved how with each one of these things, you started with that's very interesting. Because it does seem like when you're trying to deal with alopecia areata and kind of manage it and do whatever, it seems like there might be some trial and error involved. And you have all these different tools and you see which one works best for certain individuals.
I think there's a lot of that, but I also love the idea that we have some solid science behind some good new medicines that I can say, this is what's going to happen with this medicine. So I like having a little bit of both.
It kind of lets you play a little hair detective going on here. You got to kind of crack the case and figure out how you can best fix it.
And how do we fix it and minimize side effects? So maybe we use a big gun to fix it, but we can't use as much as we want. So then we use some of these other things to minimize some of the other side effects.
Yeah. Now, what about natural treatments? Because I know a lot of folks like to lean toward those sort of things. And there are just there's no shortage of great ideas available if you go looking online. Are any of these kind of worth trying?
To some degree, a lot of those have been used by the time people get to me. Um, and and they have or have not worked. You also have to be careful that alopecia areata can sometimes just stop on its own, and the hairs can grow back, and you don't know what to attribute that regrowth to if you're using something maybe that hasn't been studied as well as other things.
Yeah. So when people talk about like using essential oils or aromatherapy, I've even seen like going to the kitchen and pulling out honey and onions, garlic, oatmeal, all this sort of stuff. It sounds like you shouldn't put a lot of stock in that it's going to magically solve everything.
I think that's a good way to look at it. There have been some instances where we've used allergens. We talked about even poison ivy. Now, don't do this, but certain allergens that are completely natural, and you put them on the skin. And there was a thought for a long time that if you created an allergic reaction to something and put it on the skin, the immune system would get distracted by that allergen and stop attacking the hair follicle. And there is some truth to that. There's some studies that do that. There's a couple different antigens that they've looked at. Um, but that's but now you've got a bad rash instead of the
Right.
alopecia areata. So
Well, it sounds like you're creating another problem to
yes,
deal with another, and that's usually not a great way to go about doing things.
it's hard to control that one. Yes.
And then I think you had mentioned stress, and so I want to make sure we touch on that too. Have you found that if some people are dealing with alopecia areata, that I guess working some mindfulness into their day, some stress relief, might help just kind of diminish the condition and kind of minimize those appearances?
I feel like it also helps our treatments work better. So there's something about stress that you know, you've got the accelerator and then the brake on at the same time. You can slow the car, but it makes it harder if you're doing both at the same time. So if you can use some stress mitigating techniques, yoga, box breathing, some of the things you mentioned, I think they're helpful.
Those are always great self-care strategies.
Hmm.
If people are looking at other things they can do, kind of in that same realm, to kind of help manage alopecia areata, what other things might come up? I mean, there are dietary things you might be able to do, for instance.
So hair is pretty finicky. So it needs a really good amount of protein and mineral to grow. So I think you have to be cognizant of your nutrition. And so if you're eating high quality proteins, if you're eating um, fruits and vegetables that contain lots of vitamins and minerals, I think you're nourishing that hair. Again, we're back to the sort of the fertilizer theory, but in a little different way. The minoxidil helps bring the blood in that carries all these nutrients in. If you're stressed and you're not eating, if you're losing weight, if you're not giving it the nutrition that it needs, it's harder for that hair to grow back.
It's amazing how so many things in the body are linked, and I don't think a lot of us look at our hair as something that has to do with all these other things, but it is affected. I mean, and whatever whatever you're eating, whatever you're feeling, it will eventually, it sounds like, trickle up to to the locks on your head.
Yeah, because they're kind of the last in line. Everything else needs to be fed first. Your heart needs to be fed first. Your brain needs to be really fed first. And so our hair becomes non-essential if there's a limited supply of nutrients.
Yeah, it's kind of the canary in the coal mine. It seems like if you have a problem, it might pop up in your hair first because your body's going to protect everything else, make that a priority.
That's a different kind of hair loss, but absolutely. Yeah.
All right. At the beginning of this chat, we kind of talked a little bit about the emotional aspect of hair loss. Do you have tips or suggestions for folks kind of struggling with how they feel with alopecia areata?
A lot of people have told me people look at them like they're sick. They get it confused with chemotherapy issues. They get it confused with infectious disease issues. And so they get treated differently and not necessarily in a good way. We already said this is not contagious. But to the person standing next to you in line at the grocery store who backs up a step, they don't know that this is, not contagious or not, infectious kind of thing. And so that's through the years, and there's other diseases that this happens with too. But I think that makes you feel differently about yourself. You're not going to say hello to that person or help them with their groceries if they've just stepped away from you. So we interact differently when our appearance puts a barrier between us and other people.
So what do you advise people to, I guess, to do in those situations? Like how do you cope with that? How do you handle it?
So there's lots of like cool hair pieces or, lots of things that we can do to make it not look like it does. Men probably have it a little easier than women, because if you just shave your hair, as my brother says, bald is a style, whereas the patchiness is probably not. But there are definitely medical grade hairstylists that can make pieces or add pieces, or there's cool wraps and ways of diverting the eye from it so that you can feel a little better about it. And I use it for all the types of hair loss, not just alopecia areata.
And I'd imagine there's also the styling you can do. If the patches are small enough, you might be able to, comb over it or do something like that. But it takes a little bit of work, and you just have to kind of deal with it as it comes.
Yeah, there's that. The bigger issues come with loss of eyebrows and eyelashes, because there can be functional issues with that. You get more stuff in your eyes and more irritation. And some people who've had this long-standing, now this goes back even before the JAK inhibitors, but would have their eyebrows tattooed on so that they didn't look too blank.
Does the hair eventually grow back, or is that kind of, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't?
Mostly it does, but there are instances where it doesn't.
Okay. And I think there's a process there. I mean, that's not an overnight thing where it just comes back. I mean, you're looking at weeks.
A year.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That long.
You may see some fuzz in a few weeks to a few months, but to get actionable, stylable hair, if it's coming in a centimeter, a month, that's going to take a long time.
Wow. Well, and you could see where it would be very difficult. And you can see where the emotional aspect of that, how it would be, put a big
There's
strain
a lot
on.
of coping. Yep.
All right. Well, Dr. Kassouf, one last question for you, and then we'll kind of let you get on with your day. What's the most important message you would want to deliver to someone who's newly diagnosed with alopecia areata and just kind of wondering where they go from here?
We're excited about it. We can start to control this reaction, and it's not going to be easy, but it's doable. So mostly I find when I have to deal with things that are tough, if we have a plan, then it's easier to deal with and easier to cope with. And we have a plan for how to turn off that immune reaction. We have a plan for how to make your skin and hair more functional and less obvious in the meantime. And you're not alone.
Yeah.
It's something that we have a lot of people working on, and new things are coming. So it's exciting every day.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of reason for hope. And even though it's got to be a little crushing when it happens, if you work with your care team, you work with your dermatologist, it sounds like there are answers out there that can really help you manage the condition and keep those flare-ups at a minimum.
And the websites are good where there's some groups with patients who are at all stages of this and who've been through some of the studies and who know all the coping mechanisms and who's the best hairstylist for this kind of disease. And there's a community. So I think you have to create a community to take care of it.
Well, like I said, I think you have given us a lot of reason for hope with just everything that you kind of laid out here today. And a word you kept using throughout was interesting. And I have to say, this has been a very interesting conversation because it's amazing the advances that we've made and just how much is going on with hair that I don't even think we're always thinking about. But, it sounds like we can take care of the issues that come with alopecia areata.
We're at a point where things are taking off. So it is interesting, as I say.
All right. Well, that is a good way to end. I always like ending on a high note and a little bit of optimism. So thank you again for coming in. And we always just love these chats with you.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
If you have alopecia areata, know that there are ways to manage both the physical symptoms and the emotional side of the condition. Talk with your healthcare provider to find the approach that makes the most sense for you. If you liked what you heard today, please hit the subscribe button and leave a comment to share your thoughts. Till next time, be well.